Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our What is the Power of We podcast, Voices of We. And as you all know, we've been talking about vulnerability and we've been leaning into storytelling this year. And we are so thrilled to have as our guest today the amazing Heidi. And we will do a bit of an introduction and we will leave her to introduce herself as well. But we're so excited to have you and welcome.
Great to
Yeah,
see you.
I was so excited to have you. So we all three met actually on Aconcagua when we were climbing in Argentina. Geez, it was like what, 15 months ago now? I keep wanting to say like this last year, like it's been a little while. So yeah, we all met there. We had some beautiful bonding experiences. You had previously just done Kilimanjaro. And we are so excited to hear from you and hear about all your adventures, all the projects that you're working on. You have so many amazing things. I want to toss it over to you. Is there anything that you just want to like lead with here today?
Yes, I want to lead with the fact I miss you girls terribly. And one of you lives across the river from me, and the other lives many states away. But it feels great to see you girls again. You know, with what we went through, you really do become family. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that, what that means about what we went through. But I just want to lead with it's great to see you. And I am very empowered by the power of we and what you guys are doing. And I think you guys are going to be changing a lot of lives. And I feel very honored and humbled to be here and offer any of my experiences, the do's and the don'ts, as a guidance for your listeners. So thanks.
Oh,
Beautiful.
thank you. Oh my gosh. I'm already emotional, so this is the the way this conversation is going to go. But perhaps we start with a bit of a high note. Heidi, one of my favorite memories from Aconcagua, and just because, we started there, so maybe we just start there, is we had an Uno night really early on, where a bunch of us were playing Uno. I think pretty much all of us were in the tent playing Uno, and it kind of devolved into this like whoever wins Uno or whoever loses Uno has to do a crazy dance for like 30 seconds or a minute. And I keep coming back to that video of all of us just dancing like crazy people. And it's just like so fun to just watch. And you are the person who is set front and center in that video. So I just want to say that we are so grateful for your optimism and your smile. And honestly, that I know that there were hard days on Aconcagua, but that really your energy got us through a lot of it. So just want to thank you for that as just a starting point.
Thank you. I mean, first of all, that's really kind of you and really generous. And I'm glad that my eternal optimism, um, was not in short supply, But it's funny that you talk about the dancing because it is also a moment where you're like, you know how they say dance like no one's watching? That is what I did. And it was not pretty, but it was also so freeing in that moment to be in a non-judgment zone, which is really a gift to be able to do that. It's such a small thing, but it was really, in hindsight, such a big thing. So,
And I'm actually just really curious, like, have you always been that way? Is that something that you've developed through the years? Because some people are just kind of born with it, and some people it's like something that you kind of had to work at and like a skill almost that you to really do that. So I'm very curious how that is for you.
you know, I love a question like this. And you're the first person in my life who's ever asked it. And it is an interesting one for me to think about because I wasn't born that way. I was certainly born a happy kid. I grew up in the Midwest in a really tiny town. I grew up in a town of 4,000, so completely sheltered, very small town, incredible tenants that go along with that. But I grew up in a family where it was like keeping up with the Joneses. And ironically, that is my last name, but it was, perform, do well, be happy, even though life is full of ups and downs and hard moments and happy moments. And it wasn't overt. It was just something, I grew up in a small town. My dad was the funeral director, little footnote to our story, and he taught at the neighboring city high school. So I think as a result, we had like an antique shop as like a side hustle and just like a passion of my parents in our town. So we had these businesses that were very public. And so I think there's just this like underlying kind of like subconscious pressure of like, do your thing, put a smile on your face. Again, it wasn't overt, nothing that our parents told us, but you definitely grew up like be happy, in addition to the tenets of being kind and treating people like you want to be treated, which I think the Midwest is glorious for in a lot of cases. But I definitely like pushed down talking about things that were painful or anything that was traumatic. And I definitely went through traumatic things and things that were actions of my own and things that I was just watching happen in front of me. As you live, hopefully on this earth for a few years, you're going to see or experience things that, do leave trauma marks on you. And I never talked about it with anybody, even my best friends. And I would say about 12 or 15 years ago, I just went through kind of a moment where I was like, what am I doing? Like, I'm not authentically letting people in. I am an authentic person. I am who you think I am. I am an eternal optimist. I will always see the glass half full. So that is in my DNA. But I'm the one who's there for you. I'll ask you the questions. I'll be there for you. And in life, I have found there's a lot more people who need someone to be there for them than they have the capacity to turn it around and ask how you're doing. And not that that makes them bad people, just we all live lives of ups and downs. So now when you know me and you're like, how are you? And we started this way before we recorded. How are you? And I was like, I'm having a really tough time right now. Like, I'm really going through something. I'm having a lot of stress. And, that's what you get from me when I'm in your trust circle, because I realize now that was the connector that was missing for people around me to get to know me, you know? So does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, it's beautiful. I feel like it really ties into this, vulnerability that we've been talking about. And it's actually what we all crave from each other, right? It's like we want the most vulnerable, authentic self. If we wanted that, performance, happiness, we would all just go to Chat GPT and be like, hey, yo, like give me some good stuff, But actually what we're craving are people's hearts. And I actually remember a moment when we were climbing Aconcagua. It was my hardest day. Might have been other people's hardest day. It was we all had our hard day, hard day there, but I was definitely my hardest day. And I think we had just reached Camp 1 or Camp 2, and you, me, and another woman got in a tent, and all of a sudden we were just having like the most beautiful heart to heart. It's like the mountain had kind of stripped us really raw, and that vulnerability and us sharing our stories of why we were there really brought us together. And, I think that that's something that I really appreciate also about the mountains is it strips you raw. And then you get to have those moments where you tell your stories because there's always a why that we go do this crazy shit. Like there's always a why. And really being able to feel into that moment. I mean, that will always be one of the top three moments for me of that trip is that bonding time that we had just in that tent crying and sharing so openly from our heart. So I really love and appreciate that from you. And I see that from you as well.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. You realize that in life, there are a lot of people who don't really get to show the truly authentic part of themselves because of fear of judgment. And maybe that fear is there to protect us in a lot of scenarios, and it needs to be there. But you realize that there's people who go through their entire life and never really get to share how something felt or how something affected them or how they didn't want to be defined by something they went through. And yeah, that was, to be honest, one of the top 5 moments of my life with you in that tent and one of our other fellow female climbers. And we certainly didn't really even know each other, but the setting enabled us to be void of titles, makeup, hair done, nails done, all the things. And just we were like the essence of who we are as a species. And, if for anyone listening out here, even just to go on some sort of trip where you're void, where you don't have your electronics, you don't have the things that tether you that you think are important in life, that you find out later are not as important, it really allows you to show yourself who you really are as well. So, yeah, that was a really and by cry, we were all ugly crying.
We were trying to breathe at 18,000 feet. Like,
Yes.
okay,
For
cry now.
reference, it
Okay.
is hard to breathe up there. But no, you're so right. And I think so often what happens in life is when we put up walls of whatever kind, and as you just talked about, even as you were in a place where you would be there for others, but how do you open to allowing others to be there for you? All of this, it kind of breeds this world of isolation. And I think Steffi said it, we're all just craving connection. And that is who we are as a species, right? As human beings, we are physically and physiologically wired to connect with each other. And we just can't do that. We simply cannot do that unless we fully embrace vulnerability. And that's not just allowing people to share themselves with us. It also goes the other way, which is the hardest part, right? Which is allowing ourselves to share with others, and expecting nothing in return, but just being there for each other. And yeah, connecting with others, but also, as you said, connecting with ourselves, right? And there's so often this thing of like, oh, I need a reset. I'm going to go off into nature and be with myself and connect with myself. And that is also a form of vulnerability, right? When you're able to actually be real and true and raw and gritty with yourself, that also takes a huge amount of vulnerability to do. So just thank you for that, and thank you for being who you are, and that journey to this eternal optimism. It's nature and nurture, I guess you could say. You mentioned Someone mentioned your why. And I think one of the first things I actually really didn't know you at all. This was before we had left the hotel, is you walked around with a GoPro, and you will talk a little bit about your filmmaking in a bit. But you walked around with your GoPro and you asked all of us in 15 seconds. It was like you sprung it on us. You're like, in 15 seconds, what is your why? And so I thought maybe this was a time to reflect that question back to you: is what was your why coming into Aconcagua, and did it evolve at all as you were climbing, and now that you've had 15 months or so afterwards to reflect on it?
Yeah, I love to think about a person's why or ask close friends their whys because it really lets you into how they're thinking, not how you perceive them. And so, yeah, I just did for a fun moment with all 12 of us say, what is your why? Because I know for me, I wanted to start the trip with an intention. And not that I wanted to press it on anyone, but I thought, they're all here for some reason. And to your point, Anjali, we didn't know each other. And we've got so many countries represented, and we've got, a lot of women and some men represented. And I thought it would be just interesting to hear their why, to understand a bit more about them. And also, I knew for me, it was self serving as well, because I wanted to. I'm a big believer in manifesting and saying things because I believe you will exhibit whatever is in your head. So for me, my why was to show women what they're capable of. And I have been on that why for probably 12 years of really like it's an intention of mine. I created a nonprofit as a result. Even before the nonprofit, I was doing workouts in New York City that I would invite women only to allow them to be themselves without the subconscious influence of another gender where you might be a little quieter or you might line up in a different space. So I've been on this kind of journey for a while. And, it's funny when you do things and you say, I'm doing it for others, but you're really doing it for yourself. Or that's how I feel. So while I say to you, I've been on this journey for 10 or 12 years of wanting to empower others. I think at the end of the day, I'm also empowering myself and continuing to remind myself of what I'm capable of, because there's certainly a lot of media that we see in our daily lives and comparisons of people that we just subconsciously draw that make us feel bad or worse about ourselves. So I am doing this because I do believe in the team element, and empowering each other empowers ourselves. But I would be willing to say my therapist would probably say to you that, you are also doing this for yourself, and that is okay too, you know? And to answer your question, did it evolve? It evolved. I mean, I guess it didn't totally evolve. It did become more more for me, because I definitely had a really difficult time on the mountain. So I guess it evolved in that while I wanted to be there to empower others, I then looked to you all who empowered me ultimately. And there's no question in my mind that I would not have gotten up on that mountain if it hadn't been specifically for you two women and a handful of other women in our group that were either walking with me and my team, or were there in different tents at night, and would really pay forward that empowerment. But I guess it did evolve in that I used the empowerment of you guys to really help me when we were all out there.
That's beautiful. I love that. It's like the reciprocity, right? Because it really is, and I think that that was something that was so unique with that group is the amount of women and the amount of supportive women. It's like we all fiercely had each other's back. We were like, "Come hell or high water, I will crawl with you. We will get there together, though. We will make it." And that was very beautiful. And I would even like to segue this into some of your filmmaking because you have actually led you know, an expedition on Kilimanjaro where to empower women. And I like you are a leader in this. You don't just embody this, you're actually a leader and you are doing the work for this. And I would love to hear about that and for you to tell us a little bit more about that journey and that why and what this is that you created because it's really quite special.
Yes,
Well,
which is
thank you.
related to the nonprofit. So definitely tie that in as well.
Yeah, before the pandemic, I alluded to, I used to host these all girl meetups in the five boroughs in New York City. And we would meet up, and they were generally at CrossFit spaces. And we would do a workout, and I would invite in a woman to tell her story. So we would work out, we would get unzipped, AKA being on the mountain, same idea, where you are your most vulnerable self. And I would have the woman get up there to tell her story. Again, it's exactly what you're doing. I so believe in the power of telling your story. And when the pandemic shut everything down for in person events, and in New York City, we were shut down for a nice solid couple of years. When I reemerged late 2021, early 2022, I was like, what do I do? I felt like I lost my momentum with my crew of women that were going to these workouts. And I thought, what is my next level of helping women to feel empowered? And during that time, I started noticing and seeing more on social media about mountaineering and this idea of the seven summits, summiting the tallest mountain on each of the seven continents. And so for myself, I was like, I want to do this. And one of the entry points is the mountain in Africa, which is the tallest freestanding mountain called Mount Kilimanjaro. So I thought, what the heck? I'm going to just email my base and I'm going to say, tell me your why, send it to me in a video form, and I'm going to somehow, God knows, manage to take you on an all expense paid trip to Kilimanjaro. You're going to hike the mountain. We're going to try to get to the top, but it's not all about getting to the top. We're going to take this journey. And in return for getting you there and giving you this experience, um, you're going to tell your story, and it's going to be as a means to empower in a documentary. So I sent it out and I thought it's going to be crickets. Like, I don't know, is this too big of an ask? And then I started getting some slow emails back with some videos. And it turned out that I really had to narrow it down to a handful of people. And then I ultimately ended up taking 3 women to Africa. And I did know one of them. It was a woman who I knew and had been coming to my events, but I didn't know her. And then there were 2 other individuals who also either saw the submission or heard about it through someone else and applied and ended up taking these women. We did a whole training program to prepare them. And then we went to Kilimanjaro in uh, the fall of 2022. So I had the idea in January of 2022. I just bootstrapped and started putting the message out there, did a GoFundMe, started getting the word out. And you know, when things happen and it says to you, you're on the right track, this is what you should be doing. I started to fundraise and I hit a plateau. And I was trying to raise $30,000 and I still had like 15K to go. And I had exhausted friends and family. I'd done what I could do. And one of my mentors, who her name is Reshma Sajani, who founded Girls Who Code, I said, Reshma, I don't know what to do. This is it. I'm going to have to take out a loan. I can't not take these women and I don't know what to do. And she said, put it up on GoFundMe. And I was like, no way. Like, I feel like I know why I need to give these girls this experience, but I don't know that I feel like that's a legitimate ask. And she said, you are providing these women a service that they could never get in their lives. This is important. This should be on there. So I trepidatiously threw it up. And it just so happened in March of 2022, post Grape Nuts, the cereal, was launching a secret campaign. They were looking for 10 female explorers who were doing something epic to fund their journeys as part of their 125th anniversary. And they were going to give away $125,000. So again, I'm about to think about looking into loans for these women. I've got it up on GoFundMe, but it's again slow trickles. And I get a message one day that says, congratulations on fulfilling your goal. And I was like, I'm totally being punked. I'm still 15K away. I log in and I see, congratulations. And we want to help you get to this goal, et cetera, post grape nuts. And I'm like, post grape nuts? Like what? I call my best friend. I'm like, I call my partner, I call my best friend. I'm like, I don't know what I'm looking at. They all log in. And then we Google and we find out there was this secret campaign. That's when I knew you're doing exactly what you should be doing. They basically fulfilled the campaign. And that was, really the turning point in going full steam ahead. This is where we should be. So I just finished the film. It was a 2-year project, which I'm finding in the film business is actually quite rapid. I know for the crew involved, they were like, "Oh, when is it going to be done?" And so I'm very proud that we have finished it, and we're now at the point of submitting it for festival consideration.
Congratulations. It is stunning and important. It's so important. I hope that it showed me it. I hope it shows others as well when they watch it, which yeah, by the way, I managed to finally see it. It's just spectacular and just
Oh,
I hope it shows people that there are really no limitations to what they can do and what healing looks like. There's no limit to it. There's no end point, there's no limit to it. And it's a constant journey. And if we're on the path to being in community with each other and working together to continue our healing journeys, then there is no limit. It's so inspiring. So thank you for creating it and congratulations. That's so
Ah,
exciting.
huge congratulations.
thank you. Yeah.
Tell us about the process of being on the mountain and creating a documentary around storytelling. I can imagine there are always some, as hard as it is to choose to be vulnerable, to continue to choose to be vulnerable in front of a camera gives a completely new meaning to the word vulnerability. How did you navigate that? What was that experience like? And oh yeah, plus by the way, you're climbing a mountain too at the same time.
Yeah, it was a journey. It's not for the faint of heart. I don't know that I would ever do it again. I'm glad I did it on the mountain I did. I could have never done that, as you all intimately know, on Aconcagua, as I had such a struggle bus myself. But yes, it was definitely a lot of like run ahead, turn around, film, catch my breath, let them go by, recoup. And, in that situation, it wasn't easy for me. I managed it, but it certainly wasn't easy. And I was trying to be the emotional support animal for these three women. So this was a moment where I couldn't really be totally authentic in terms of maybe divulging a lot of what I was going through because they were going through their own hardships. And I really did fill a role of I needed to be there for them. And I'm so happy that I was able to do that. But it is not for the faint of heart to try to film something and climb something for your first time ever. I have no mountaineering experience. So this was all brand new to me as well. But very rewarding, and I wouldn't have changed it for the world. I would do that over. I just wouldn't do it again in the same way, if that makes sense. But no, the vulnerability these women shared is really inspiring. When you hear their stories, I was not anticipating the profound nature of the topics that the girls would divulge because I feel like we all have stories and they don't need to be profound. But the stories, in fact, to be honest, the less profound you think your story is, the more connecting it is because the more relatable it is because not everybody has, fortunately so, gone through really profound topics. And we don't wish that on anyone. So, however, what the girls shared is really inspiring. And I am honored that they shared that space. And I can only say that I hope they did that because of the comfort and space that I showed them or endeavored to show them so that they would feel safe enough to tell their stories. And, when you watch them, I I mean, I'm just so empowered. We all have stories that I think to tell in a public forum is probably a no-go and might never be a go. And so these women are incredible heroes in their own right, just by pulling back the curtain on some really vulnerable things that, as you will hear, they've never said out loud before in some cases. Or it has united a family that was so torn apart by their stories, and they never thought they could even broach it to come together over that trauma. And you'll see that through this, they have found some gateways to give them some peace and solace and move past that which defines a lot of us, even if it's not outwardly. So it was very cathartic for me on so many levels. And I am honored and privileged that these women took a chance on me. So I feel very grateful.
Yeah, you should. You should feel grateful and you should also feel very proud because like you said, it's you creating that safe place and you embodying that empowerment that allows others to do that. And I am so excited to see the film when it comes out. And
Thank you.
yeah, you should feel so proud.
I appreciate that. Yeah, even just as in mountaineering, I'm a big proponent of don't be tied to the outcome because there's so much that can happen.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with this film. If this film gets some, props at festivals, that's great. If it doesn't, it's still a success. It's still going to be put out there ultimately in some distribution for people to see, whether it ultimately is YouTube or if all goes well and I can get it on a streaming network. But at the end of the day, it will be out there for people hopefully to see and ultimately just be empowered by these three very, very, very brave women. So thank you.
Beautiful. Oh, that's so exciting.
I'm
Hmm.
overwhelmed with excitement and just love, and like that's just so incredible. What would you say your biggest learning has been in the last 2 years working on this documentary, being in Kilimanjaro, being on Aconcagua, whatever it might be, but your biggest kind of learning from this?
My biggest takeaway, which I think will resonate with a lot of us who identify as women, is never, never take the no and stop what you're doing because, you know, while I have this great story about Post Grape Nuts and I happen to be in the right place at the right time, I don't know what this would have done without them. I truly would have taken out a loan to do this. Uh, but being in the right place at the right time, so that it was fortuitous in that regard. But I also had a lot of other no's. I reached out to so many brands, like-minded brands, where I was like, there's no way you can say no to this. You say this is what you believe in. This is what I'm doing. And I'm giving you this incredible experience that maybe you wouldn't be activating on your own. And I mean, I have a spreadsheet of over 500 reach outs that I did. And while I did get some good partnerships, not all of them were money. They wanted to give more product, which also the girls needed, and I gladly took. But of course, money was what we really needed. But I had, 89% of those 500 were no's. And it was discouraging. And like I said, I had a moment that day where I was like, I can't do this and ask people for money. I'm going to have to take on a kind of bigger burden onto myself. And, you know, and I would have done that. But I guess my biggest takeaway is never just assume because someone says they're not going to help you, and or you feel like they're saying they don't believe in you, to not stop what you're doing. I am proof. I have tirelessly worked on this endeavor for over a decade, and I've had to beg people to come to events. I've given it away free, right? Like, from the outside in, it's a lot of smoke and mirrors. And I'm here to unzip and say that I've had to give a lot away. I've had to beg, plead, cry, crawl, and I would do it all over again because you just need the one yes. And that's all I ever need to make me continue to push forward. And so I'm always striving for that. And that was that was not only what this was and still is. Like, I got my first no from a film. I got two yeses in a film festival, and I got my first no. Now I've applied to probably 100. So I'm still in a winning category, but there's going to be a lot more no's that come up. But it doesn't matter. I've already got two yeses so far. And even if I only had one, it is enough to keep me continuing the fight. So that's my biggest takeaway is don't ever be defined by someone else's opinion of you or your work, because that is through their lens, and their lens is diluted with their experiences, and it has nothing to do with you.
Needed to hear that today. Thank you.
I remind myself of that, by the way.
Yeah.
Also, anytime you hear people say or espouse upon these types of things, like me, it is also because I need to hear it. FYI. Like, I have down days. I got on here before and told the girls we'll have our own like sesh later where I'm sure I will cry and let them know like really what's burdening my heart right now, because I am not without burdens. I am not without stress. I am not without trauma. And I make space for that, but I also make space to try to celebrate the wins.
In a
Yeah.
way, I feel like those two things are a little bit related, right? It's like you get the no's, no's, no's from others, and then it takes that one yes. But there's also that internal. It's like we have the trauma, we have the bad days, we cry our eyes out, we feel all the things, and then it's like, oh, but we have this one thing that we can kind of celebrate, or this one little thing that's going right. And it's almost like, how many no's do we have, that life throws at us personally that we're taking in? And then it's like, but that one little yes, it's like, oh, and it could be as simple as like a beautiful day outside, or like, somebody gives you a compliment, or, you find something internal, like, and so I love that parallel of like the external and the internal, because I think that they're actually very relatable in both ways. It's like we cling to that yes, and we go through the hardship for the yes. And that's, yes in business, yes in our careers, yes in all of the endeavors that we do. And that's also yes to just like living life as that eternal optimist that you are. It's like all this stuff can happen, but then one little thing happens, And it could be, even that we're just sitting here connecting and it's like, yes, this is what I'm living for. I can do this. And this pushes you, just a little bit further. And it helps to melt away that stress and keeps us going.
Yeah, and I'll springboard off of what you just said one more level, which is what I've learned through every new stage of my life is that we need the no's. We need the no's for resiliency. And you realize if you afford the time to rewind your life and consider the no's, but also consider where you've gotten. The no's are always going to outnumber the yeses, but the yeses are going to be impactful. And so those 10 steps back are fine because that yes is going to be 20 steps forward. And I look back and I'm like, we too, more specifically, because I am a woman and I can speak from that realm, we can take a lot. And I don't think we give ourselves credit for how much we can take on, how much we can withstand, how much we can keep our shit together and move through. And we have to do that so that when we get the wins, they feel so full, right? If we got yeses all the time, we'd be bored,
I'd be
We'd
so
be
right?
we'd be white men, please. Sorry. I don't know if I would say
You can totally say that.
You can say whatever you want. It's our podcast.
Yep.
Oh,
And
and with
I
that
was
mic
listening.
drop.
Well, I was listening to, and I want to make sure everybody listens to your podcast with Sienna. Um, you know, her podcast was when you talk about vulnerability, like I was crying with her. I was crying, at the emotion she shared in her stories and vulnerability, it connected me. It made me actually even more excited to be here with you because, you've created this safe space. And, again, I'll go back to how we started. Not everybody has that. And I think even if you don't have that, if you can just experience it by listening to your podcasts, I think that will enable you to maybe hold space for those in your life so that you can have that and others can have that. But I just want to mention that because I hope people will go out and listen to your podcast with Sienna because it was really profound for me to take in. So thank you. And thanks to her for sharing.
and thanks to you for being equally vulnerable as we've been chatting today. It's been honestly such a joy from the eternal optimism. It's been such a joy, and I'm so excited to continue to see how your documentary unfolds, how your why and your mission continues to unfold. I feel like it keeps coming up and it manifests in life in all of these different ways. And it's not just one project or another. It's just literally the way that you live your life. And that's so inspiring and incredible. So thank you for that. And thank you for being who you are. I feel like we're coming to an end of time, but if there's anything that you would like to leave people with before we go, would absolutely welcome that.
I think the last thing that I would just say, and it's been a mantra of mine for many, many years, is it's a quote that I take no credit for. It's on many stickers and badges out there, but it is, what would you do if you knew you wouldn't fail? And if you just think about that for a second, you would do all the things. And I feel like in life, what has served me well is taking a chance, pushing the boundaries, disregarding the no's, staying true to what I want to see happen. And if you're tireless, it will happen. So, what would you do if you wouldn't fail? Right? It's endless, infinite possibilities,
Limitless.
limitless.
Yeah.
Love it.
Beautiful. Great. Thank you so much, Heidi. And
Thank
we will
you.
definitely link all of your socials and where people can find you so that they can keep in touch and stay tuned for the documentary and all of the great work that you're doing. And yeah, we'll link that all in the show notes. So thank you so much for being here, for sharing the reality, the behind the scenes, and just for your eternal optimism and your empowerment and your vulnerability. We really, really appreciate having you here today. I just love
I
you.
love you guys. Thank you. I love
Love
you
you
guys
so
so
much.
much. Thank you.